Be sure to subscribe for a chance to win a $50 Amazon gift card if you haven't already. Speaking of which, you guys have reached the 30 shares mark and the prize will officially go up from $20 to $50. Let me know in the comments for future giveaways if you would prefer one winner of a large prize or 3 to 5 winners of smaller prizes, say 5 winners of $20 gift cards. Now, on to the stories. There's not much else creepier than a secluded cabin in the woods. This world is a strange one. Tonight, we visit 3 creepy cabins and the strange, horrific goings-on there. From late-night attacks to strange claw marks at the door, there are things that want inside, or for us to come outside to them. Whatever they are, it's safe to say they have nothing good in mind for us. Lock the doors and lower the blinds. Here come 3 true scary cabin in the woods stories. Number 1. Cabin Terror. This happened to me when I was 17 in southern Missouri near the small town of Forsyth. My cousin and I were staying the weekend at a cabin that our family owns in the Mark Twain National Forest. It was about 10:30 at night and we were just sitting in the back room playing PlayStation and talking. Suddenly my cousin sat up with a frightened look on his face and turned around and looked out the window behind us. I asked what was wrong and he said, "Something was looking at us from outside the window." Normally, I would have laughed it off because of his past history of playing pranks and goofing around, but his face was as pale as a corpse. Alarmed, I asked him what it looked like. He said he only saw it for a second, but he didn't get a good look. It wasn't human looking at all, though. He said that when the TV screen went black to load the next stage of the video game, he could see the reflection of the window on the screen. A few moments later, my dog, a large Rottweiler, began barking and growling in the front room. We ran out there, and he was frozen solid staring at the door, growling still. I was terrified. We stood and stared at the door for a few minutes, and nothing happened. I went to the bedroom and grabbed my .22 rifle I had brought along. I walked over and slowly opened the front door and told my dog to get him. Normally, this dog would have rushed outside and raised hell with whatever was out there, but he just stood there whimpering and cowering by me. He would not go within 5 feet of that door. After about 5 minutes of trying to get my dog to go out, we heard something on the roof. It sounded like something ran from the back of the house to the front. I was scared to death, but curious. We worked up enough courage to walk out onto the front deck. The front deck has a large overhang and sits about 5 feet off the ground. We stood on the deck for a few moments. We saw something from the corner of our eyes drop from the roof to the ground and heard it go under the porch. I said something along the lines of, "Is someone out there? I have a gun. You better leave us alone." Then I heard the most frightening sound I have ever heard in my life. Whatever was under the porch let out a high-pitched scream that lasted only a few seconds. We quickly ran back inside. We continued to hear whatever the thing was scurry around outside the cabin. None of the windows in the cabin had blinds or curtains either, which made me feel twice as uneasy. We stayed in the cabin for the rest of the night with the lights on, sitting in a corner away from the windows with the gun fully loaded and ready to fire on this thing if it decided it wanted to come inside. We heard a lot of scratching sounds coming from the back door, and the sound of what might have been the doorknob jiggling. We heard more scratching coming from the back room where we were at earlier. Finally, the noises stopped, and we heard nothing for about 4 hours. We continued to wait until the sun came up. It had been daylight for about 2 hours. We went outside and looked around the cabin. On the back door, there were deep scratch marks, and also on the window of the back room there were deep scratch marks on the pane. We could not find any footprints because it was fall and there were leaves all over the ground. We packed up our stuff and left in a hurry. Later, I asked my cousin to describe what he had seen in the window. He said he didn't get a good look. but it was tannish brown in color, with beady black eyes, no hair, and sharp teeth. He said that it was grinning at him when he saw it. He said about as soon as he turned around and looked, it quickly ducked down. This is something that is burned into my mind for the rest of my life. Just typing this has given me the same feeling of terror I had 7 years ago. I've never shared this story with anyone, not even my family. My cousin and I haven't spoken about it since that day. Number 2. The Thing at the Cabin Door. In the spring of 96 or 97, 2 of my best friends and I decided we wanted to go camping and get drunk. We lived in the Adirondack Mountains of New York at the time. There is an old mine with a ton of huge abandoned buildings. This is where we decided to camp. We all had our own four-wheelers and we met outside of the gates in the morning sometime and rode through the miles of overgrown roads until we found an old shack of some sort that was in fairly good condition. We unpacked all of our gear and left it in the shack while we went off to hunt small game. We had expended all of our ammunition by about 5 in the afternoon and decided to head back to the shack to get drunk. When we got there, my friend Blaine went inside to grab the cooler. When he was inside, we heard him start swearing. Brad and I went inside and learned why he was angry. All of our things had been strewn all over the cabin. At first we were thinking a black bear must have done it until I realized that none of our food was touched. It was more like somebody just rummaged through our clothes and equipment. This was strange, because we were at least 8 or 9 miles from the entrance and we didn't find any footprints outside the shack besides our own. We picked up the mess and forgot about it. Later that night we were in the cabin and were on our way to inebriation when we began to hear something scratching and moving around outside the door. We thought it was some animal. We decided to not let it bother us because we didn't have any shells left for the rifles anyway. Blaine, who was always a little high-strung, wanted to go out and scare whatever it was. We said no, we didn't think it was a good idea. His argument was that we were all excellent wrestlers and that we could handle whatever was out there. Our argument was rabies. End of argument. The scratching, which got annoying if not a little persistent at times, was forgotten in our drunken stupor. We didn't even remember until Brad got up in the morning to relieve himself outside. When he noticed something unusual, there were deep gouge marks in the door about 2.5 to 3 feet up, like something was trying to claw or pry its way inside. But most disturbing of all were the tracks all around the shack. It looked like the tracks of a child with 5 toes just like a human's, only the tracks were about 10 to 11 inches long and only about 2 inches wide, like the feet were stretched out. None of us has ever come across any tracks like that before. Could have been some animal of some sort that we had never seen, but the tracks just didn't seem right. To this day, I wonder what would have happened to us if we let Blaine open that door. Number 3. The Creature at the Secluded Cabin. My family owns a small secluded cabin in southwest Virginia. This past summer, we decided to spend around 3 weeks out there. The cabin has electricity and running water, but no TVs or computers. The 3rd day of our visit, the nearest neighbor, a cattle farmer who lives about 2 miles down the road, came up to our cabin and informed us that during the past 2 weeks, that some of his cattle have been slaughtered and mutilated. There are foxes and wolves in those hills, and occasionally a small black bear, but nothing that could do this much damage over a short period of time. He asked us if we had seen anything and told us to keep our eyes open if we saw a rabid fox, a wolf, a bear, or anything like that could have possibly done it. We told him we would, and he thanked us and left. The next 5 or 6 days passed uneventfully, but around a week after the farmer came to our house, we experienced something strange. That day we barbecued hot dogs and hamburgers and had a small party with some close friends, but none of them stayed the night. Around 11:30, my wife and I decided to go to bed. We slept peacefully until about 3:45 when there was a loud crash outside, and our dog started barking furiously. I didn't have a rifle or any other type of weapon, so I decided to cautiously proceed downstairs and turn on the floodlights around the cabin. The switch to the lights was outside on the deck of the cabin, so I proceeded out there and turned them on. What I saw next still baffles me. At my truck there was a creature standing upright, about 7 feet tall, with huge claws on its hands. It had white hair that was almost gray, but I couldn't really see its eyes. It seemed to be searching around the bed of the truck and was paying no attention to the frantic dog. When the lights came on, it did nothing but continue its search, but then it looked up at the deck. By now I was frozen in horror, and it turned around and made eye contact with me. It then made a horrible, screeching sound, almost as if it was in terror from the sight of me. At first it seemed as if it was going to charge at me and climb the steps onto the deck, but then in a terrorized rage it made another screech and sprinted away. It ran upright, and its claws were almost past its knees. The next day we left the cabin and reported what we saw to the local deputy. He dismissed it as nothing more than a bear and said we should not concern ourselves with backwoods business. I'm sure these creepy true stories will have you thinking twice about heading off to that nice little cabin for a quiet getaway anytime soon. Because what will you do when you hear the scratching at your door, even though you're miles away from another person? What might be outside, begging to be let in? You're safe as long as you don't open the door, unless, of course, it forces itself inside. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Oh, and check out these other creepy true stories.